Okay. I would like to, I want to ask this may sound like a really funny question, but we know that the 144,000 is 12,000 from each tribe. Okay, and I'm
going to cringe on that one just a little bit,
well,
but representing
yes
the tribes.
That is chapter 7 in Revelation, and it talks about 12,000 from the tribe of Judah, Reuben, Gad, Asher, Naphtali, Manasseh, Simeon, Levi, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. Okay, that's the 12. So we know that 12,000 from each of those. Okay, now go back to chapter 14, verses 3 and 4. And it says, "And they sang a new song before the throne and before the 4 living creatures and the elders. No one could learn the song except for the 144,000 who had been redeemed from the earth. These are those who did not defile themselves with women, for they kept themselves pure." So that would indicate it would only be 144,000 men. No women in that 144,000. Okay. I just found that unique.
Go further with that. Unique how?
The fact that God only chose 144,000 men. Now we do know when you look in the Gospels, when Jesus fed the 5,000, that it only numbered the men, but they also had their wives and children with them. Except for in this case, these men will not even have wives. So it is indicating, and no children, unless it, in Jewish custom, unless it would be a boy of 12 or older, approximately.
But we know that they have no wives because
it says
they're virgins.
Correct.
And they have not been with women.
Right.
Which means that they also have not been given in marriage.
Correct.
Okay, so it's 144,000 men who do not have wives.
I just found that unique.
Now, here's another thing that's going to be interesting about that. Everybody wants to know, well, God comes back and there's this great slaughter of the world. And by the way, there's going to be this purging of the world before we ever enter into the tribulation. This is another conversation you and I had.
Right. Persecution and slaying and captivity of the saints even before the mark of the beast.
And before tribulation. Yeah. I mean, you
told me earlier that no, because of the way that Revelation, the stories overlap and hone into smaller pictures and stuff to get more detail with each thing that is said.
Right, but there will be, Jesus even said it, go back to Matthew chapter 24, before that desolation happens in the temple, he goes through all these scenarios of how bad the earth will be, and death and persecution is going to be part of that. People are going to die.
Well, we're already seeing persecution of the saints of the churches. Here in America, we're not going under the persecution. I mean, they're prejudiced against us, but we're not in true persecution. But it's coming. But not like in the underground churches in other parts of
Korea,
the world, and in
China, where you could be killed,
in the Arabic countries, the
Coptic Christians just being beheaded. Sure,
correct. And so that is extreme persecution.
It is. That's extreme persecution. But there's things that are going to happen if there's going to be quite a bit of people here. If America is going to be gone because of a nuclear thing that's happening. I mean, I don't know how many people are aware of the nuclear buildup that we are doing in the South Pacific right now. We have nuclear ships that are over there. We have nuclear warheads on ships that are already over there. We're getting into advanced warfare. We had China fired on one of our planes with a laser. If it hadn't refracted through the glass of the cockpit, we're not exactly sure how damaged the pilots would have been. And that's not just new. That's kind of an old thing that happened, and that's how it tipped our hands to know that they actually have laser weapons. We're building up of nuclear bombs over there, and we're soliciting Australia to help us. They're giving us a runway. We've purchased property in the Philippines, and they were putting in a naval base there. So we're really building up. A lot of people aren't paying attention to, and I have to go looking for it to find out how we're building up on the edge of China. But that is something that we're doing. Well, a lot of people don't know that America has a policy of what is called shared mutual destruction, that if you choose to fire upon us, that we have 10 submarines that carry nothing but nuclear warheads on them that assures your destruction if you decide to fire on us. And the captains, in the case of not being able to get a hold of the United States or their command posts, have standing orders that is what they do. We can, and they can, doesn't matter where they're at, what ocean. The nuclear warheads that they have can be fired from anywhere around the world and hit their target on land anywhere they want to. So this is, so you ask the question, United States, where are we? It doesn't seem that we're there. And then take that one step further, and that is that if the rapture does happen and we end up going out, that's just what would be left. I'm going to end where we started. I would love to be able to say that for the Church of America, rapture is going to happen, and that's God blessing us for our faithfulness so that we don't have to go through all the rest of that stuff. Is that possible? Absolutely. Because nobody has got all the timing in this thing figured out. All I know is what it tells us so that we won't be deceived. And that's the whole purpose of why I've even started these discussions, because the one thing that is troubling me in our culture right at the moment is the amount of deception. Out of anything else, it's the amount of deception that I see. People aren't even, I've asked this question 10 years ago, started with it, and it's more relevant now than when I started asking it. I thought I was just being philosophical, and that is, what happens to a culture when its science starts lying to it? We're seeing well over 10 to 20 years of that happening. It's so much so that as a country, we can't believe our top doctors that tell us anything. We can't trust we can't trust the disclaimers that are on any of our medical devices, because it's all about lawsuits, and so it may be honest, it may be dishonest. I mean, for goodness sakes, buy a cup of coffee at McDonald's and it says caution, coffee is hot. Okay, it's where we are, but that's not deception, that's stupidity, but it's where we are. But the rest of it is a deception right now with, and this is why drawing a line in the sand, what's happening with the COVID is not being honest. But who can you believe? Because this guy says enough of the truth, but then throws in these little statements over here that make you go, wait a minute, that's not true. This next doctor comes out, and all of a sudden a team of emergency room physicians go, that's not true. and then you come to find out that money is behind some of this, and then all of a sudden so what is true and what isn't true? I can't believe you. So what happens to a culture when its science lies to it for money, for power, all these other things, and we're reaping that right now, and all of that is not the end time, but it is the beginning of the great deception Jesus started in Matthew chapter 24.
You brought us back to Matthew 24.
Which starts off with, see that you are not deceived.
Correct. Matthew 24, it says that, so verse 15, so when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation.
Abomination that causes desolation.
Spoken
That goes
of-
back to earlier.
Spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
So it specifically talks about, Jesus is talking about those people who are specifically in Judea.
Right. And remember, he went walking into the temple and claimed it. But starting in, but before that, we know, and the Jewish people believe this right now, we want to build the temple. The temple will bring the whole, this is what they're saying, the temple will bring the whole world together. The temple will bring Christian, Jew, and Muslim together. And in the beginning of Revelation chapter 14, 13, 12, in the beginning of one of the chapters, he tells Daniel, take a reed and measure. I think it's 12.
I just told you. It's 11.
11. Oh, there we go. Take a reed and measure, but don't measure the outer court.
Right.
Because it belongs to the Gentiles. If you remember, if you go back and listen to the time of the two prophets that come and preach to the world, it says that they're going to be in Jerusalem. But the Gentiles and the way that the whole Jerusalem, so I catch this picture that when the temple is opened up, they want the whole world to come in. Well, Gentile and all is going to be in that outer court. And that's one of the reasons why he wants to go sit on that throne. The whole world is coming into that region, into Israel, to see this temple. It's going to be amazing what's going to be happening there, and that's why he wants to be on that throne, with also the understanding that he wants to be God. But the buzz and everything that's going to be happening, plus those two guys are going to be preaching in Israel, in Judea, in Jerusalem. So they're going to be face to face with each other, and let the true, and remember what Elijah said, let the true prophet call down fire from heaven. And that's going, these guys are going to be at each other. And he won't be able to touch them until that time comes. But the whole world is going to be in Judea. The amount of Gentiles, the amount of, and they're going to even come right up into the temple, into that outer court, literally just overrunning it. And I think that's what it says there about the outer temple when he says mark it, but don't do he gives a very warning about
do not measure it because it has been given to the Gentiles, where in verse 2, they will trample on the holy city for 42 months.
See the significance of the time again? And that's the same time period that those two prophets are going to be preaching. And the Gentiles are going to be in for 42 months. And that's going to be the same time that he takes over the throne, and that's what's going to usher all the Gentiles in to Jerusalem.
Also, the Jews will be there because
right.
It says, go measure the temple of God and the altar and count the worshipers there in the inner part. So,
yeah, they'll be there, but the outside's given, and the Gentiles will trash it. They'll trash it, but it's because he's come into the city, and that's what he wants. He's defiling the temple. and he has to start with the outer gates. He's working his way
Well,
in.
then it sounds like the Gentiles will be defiling and trashing, as you said, the city of Jerusalem.
Yeah, and that's what we got going on there. Okay, where the rubber meets the road.
I keep coming back to the verse in James that says, if any of you lack wisdom, you shall ask of God, who will give liberally.
Okay, but how is this knowledge, everything that we just went through, and trust me, we just burned off volumes of books and tons of research, and each one of those things could get into itsy bitsy minutest of details. But how is that going to help me live my life out there? That knowledge. How do you see it? I mean, I know what I think. I've kind of already made innuendos toward it, but how does that knowledge have it? You started off by when we were talking about the fear part, by saying that you're not as afraid. You want to know what you want to know, and I was going to ask you this then: does the knowledge of seeing this stuff help squelch the fear?
I've never really thought of it in that way.
Okay.
I guess if I know what's coming, you still feel like you're going to be blindsided with things because
There's still unknowns.
yes,
There isn't one thing that tells us how far in the future that is.
right. And there's not one thing that tells us who's going to still be around for it and who's not.
We don't know how many generations away. I mean, just because we can feel what we do in our current culture, it makes it feel like it's next week.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily true.
Well, it says, as it was in the days of Noah,
Matthew 24.
so shall it be, in the days of the coming, and so how bad were things
Now
in the
see
days
how
of
well
Noah?
But that's not what it's referring to. Because the very next scripture says they were eating and drinking, marrying and given in marriage. And then the flood came.
So in other words, life was still proceeding as normal for them,
What perceived to be as normal. Mm-hmm.
except you had 8 people that stood against the norm.
That saw, only 8 people saw what was coming. That's part of as it was in the days of Noah. It's not just the sinfulness, and in fact, it really isn't pointing out the sinfulness. What he's really pointing out is that nobody cared to look for the signs of the times.
Well, no, because it makes you feel like it's going to upset my apple cart. It's going to upset what I want to continue doing in life.
And so much so in Matthew chapter 24 that starts off with Matthew 25 saying, and so in those days it will be like this. And then Jesus gives us the parable of the 5 wise and is it 10 wise, 10 foolish? 5 wise, 5 foolish.
5.
5 because it's 10 total.
Yes.
Okay. Of the virgins who were waiting for their Lord to come, and their oil went out and they were unprepared. So you see, right at when he talks about the days of Noah, he continues with this parable of the virgins, and that nobody was prepared, like a thief in the night. That's how he came. Now, that's talking about the rapture, because he goes before he gives the thing. Excuse me. People were marrying and given in marriage, so it will be like 2 women go to the mill, and one's left. 2 are sleeping in bed, and one's left. So, speaking of the rapture, is what he's doing, and then he goes on to say that'll be at the end of Matthew chapter 24.
Right. Starting in verse 36 of 24, Matthew 24. Yeah.
And there's part of the unknown. And so that's why Jesus tells us, therefore, be ready, for you know not the hour that would come back. And of course, so many people confuse the return of the Son of Man in power and glory here on earth with the rapture. This is the harvest that you're looking at there. So that still is, you want to talk about the unknown. No man knows this hour.
Yeah.
But Jesus gives us the signs so that we can at least go, need to stay ready. I get this, need to stay ready. In fact, that's this coming Sunday sermon. That's how I was aware that where that goes. And
live each day as if it's your last, but work as if you're going to live forever.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to wrap it up for us, where the rubber meets the road. Thanks for being with us. Would love for you to leave us some comments. Again, this isn't about, we're seeing things now that aren't the end of times, but it's the kind of thing that leads to the end of times and will affect our attitude and how we follow Christ. And that's why I found it being very significant that we pay attention to just how close that we are. If you look at some of the things on the Journey website, I've posted some videos there to show you things that are happening around the world, especially over in Israel, that is fulfilling prophecy and scripture. So it's coming. But again, how far away? Nobody knows. Jesus said, nobody knows. So we keep that in mind. But thank you for joining with us. If you have any comments, please share them below, and we would greatly appreciate it. Start a conversation, and we'd love to talk with you about these kinds of things. And again, feel free to join us on Sunday mornings at 10:30. You can either do that online, or you can do that by coming down to the Stall Celebration Center in Wautoma, Wisconsin, and actually worshiping with us here live. So either way, you are invited. We would appreciate it. Thanks a lot, and thank you for a great discussion. I really appreciate it. And we'll catch you next time right here on Where the Rubber Meets the Road.